Welcome back to the part 2 of our plastic bag episode. Let's go! Our first toy for this part 2 is toy rings, submitted by Audrey Esguerra, PTRP.
I wonder how this was made kasi parang ang neat ng pagkaka-braid.
Very straightforward yung gameplay niya, no? Ano ba yung mga pwedeng ma-target dito sa toy na ginawa ni Miss Audrey?
Yung act of shooting and tossing yung toy rings, that's an example na ng RGCR pattern or yung reach or yung pag-abot, pag-grasp or yung paghawak, pag-carry or yung pagdala, and yung pag-release or yung pagbitaw. Itong RGCR pattern, it's a foundation skill para later on, mas magawa mo ng effectively yung more complex movements like yung mga coordinated movements and yung mga fine grasp.
Ano yung mga fine grasp na you're pertaining to?
Fine grasp, ito yung mga iba't ibang ways ng paghawak natin sa object depende sa kung anong size nila, kung anong shape nila, and kung ano yung function ng object. For example, meron tayong tripod grasp, pad-to-pad pinch. Tapos, we also have yung tip-to-tip naman. Sa age group na to, nagde-develop pa lang yung mga finer grasp. So, nagsa-start sila sa bigger na paghawak. Kunwari, cylindrical o kaya yung spherical grasp.
Thank you for that explanation, Kyla. Dun sa video, very simple ng gameplay niya. How can we make it more challenging?
Familiar ba kayo dun sa yung ring toss na game sa mga carnival? For a toddler, siguro pwede na rin na medyo mas malayo. Parang kailangan mag-balance. Kasi sa toddler age din, nade-develop yung mga gross motor, yung mga pangkalahatang galaw ng katawan. Like, jumping, skipping, hopping. Maganda rin na ma-develop yung balance sila. Nakatiptoe sila ng konti, nakaside sila. And then, pwede rin siguro sa gameplay itself, baguhin. Maybe we can create an obstacle course for it. If you're familiar with shows like Wipeout, American Ninja Warriors, yun yung adult version ng obstacle courses natin. For example, sa start, may hawak siya na ring. The goal of the obstacle course is masushoot niya dun sa bottle. Sigurong meron tayong tape sa floor, cross na ganyan habang hawak si ring, tapos may tatalunan or may susuotan sa ilalim na chair, saka ilalagay si ring. And then go back until all the rings are placed.
Good opportunity na to incorporate other skills. Siguro pwede at the end of the obstacle course, magsastack sila ng cups. Doon na pumapasok yung mga grasp patterns na mention ni Kyla. Pwede tayo maging creative with adding different components.
So, pwede rin siyang for cognitive, yung ating or yung sa pag-iisip natin, pwede tayong magbigay ng instructions. Get red ring. If we want to make it harder, okay, get 2 red rings or get 1 red ring and 1 blue ring.
Pwedeng matuto din yung bata ng ibang vocabulary because iba-iba yung colors ng rings. Pwede mo i-introduce yung words.
And pwede din yung sizes Pwede mo i-introduce yung concept of big versus small and yung left and right discrimination. Pwede mo sabihin, get red using your right, tapos place it on your left.
Pag mayroong kids na nahihirapan pang mag-request, instead of giving immediately, parang kailangan nilang sabihin muna ano yung gusto nila.
So, may parang social part din doon. Kasi pag requesting, diba, yung parent and yung child yung nag-interact. So, at this age, more on nagpe-play pa alone yung mga kids. Pwede siguro yung parallel play o pwedeng magkahiwalay sila ng obstacle course muna. Pwede rin naman na magto-turn taking sila. So, pwede rin natin i-start na i-practice yung pag-wait.
Parang perfect opportunity din to involve the parents. So, kanina din, dun sa konting snippet sa mga how-to, very adjustable tong rings natin. No? Pwede siya gawing malaki yung circumference, pwedeng maliit. Naisip ko lang din, alam niyo yung mga stacking cups na parang paliit ng paliit. Pwede rin siya dito, di ba?
Yes,
Parang,
tapos parang natatarget mo na din yung trial and error kasi they have to put the bigger ones sa ilalim tapos yung smaller ones sa taas. Magagamit din nila yan when they start playing with puzzles.
trial and error. Kunyari, naglalaro si kid. Oh no, di kasha. So, try another.
Yes.
Oh, this one.
Yes.
Actually, nakaka-test din yun ng frustration ng bata, di ba? Kasi pag nakailang try na siya nung trial and error niya, minsan ayaw na nung bata. Good din siya para ma-improve yung behaviors ng bata.
Marami siyang similarities dun sa mga toys na nakikita natin sa toy stores, no? Talagang modification lang yung kailangan talaga natin.
If hindi kayang lumabas to buy or ayaw natin mag-spend to buy, ayun, may mga plastic naman siguro kayo sa ilalim ng sink ninyo.
Since toddler yung mga maglalaro nito, ano yung mga dapat nating tandaan?
Usually, nagkukuha natin yung plastic bags galing sa labas. Kailangan natin i-make sure na malinis siya. Kasi hawakan siya ng mga bata. And for some toddlers, baka i-put nila sa mouth nila. So, delikado kung madumi yung plastic din.
Especially right now, everything should be hygienic. Everything should be clean.
Naisip ko lang, we can add siguro texture, maybe glue gun, or add tayo ng large beads. Pwede nga natin to i-hang, di ba? Tapos parang dun sa crib nila.
Oy, actually.
Di ba? For the younger
Mobile.
part. Thank you so much for your input, guys. Okay, let's go to our next story. We have the ring toss, submitted by Bernice Austria.
This is a big version of yung ginawa ni Ma'am Audrey kanina.
Yeah.
Sabi ko gift yung kanina.
Ayun, di ba parang bigger yung ginawa niya. Alam niyo yung parang tag game or yung pinapasa-pasa. So, pwedeng may takbuhan, ganun. Or pwedeng yung sobrang madami yung targets, kagaya nung sa period. May points. Para may competition. Pwede nga rin siya parang frisbee style yung binabat. Kasi ang laki
Actually,
eh.
tapos dapat masasalo mo siya in a certain body part.
Ay, pwede.
If we make a bigger version, alam niyo yung parang hula hoop size, tapos nakaganon yung mga bata, tapos ipapasa mo.
Fun cooperative game.
Very interesting, no? Kasi like, same toy siya with the toddler. And now this one, for teens siya. I like yung example na binigay ni Ate Rose, no? Di ba may sport na gano'n? Ano yun? Yung track and field. Sabi ko na field track. Diba yung ipapasa dun sa kabila? Very swak siya kasi very competitive siya. Ano pa kaya pwede natin gawin dito sa toy na to?
To challenge din further, sinabi mo yung track and field, mahapag-strategize dapat sila. Kasi teens na eh. Yung executive function natin, which is planning and organizing, na na-mention natin before, dapat ano na yan, intact na. So, halimbawa, di ba pag nagpa-party games tayo, yung kalamansi relay, gano'n, ako sa unan, ako sa last. Kasi, pinaplano ninyo, paano tayo mananalo?
This is extra challenging kasi you have to plan and organize with other people.
So, may social thinking ka na rin. You have to be aware of what other people might suggest.
So, ano yung mga dapat nating tandaan when we facilitate a play like this or when we play these suggested sports?
In terms of where we're currently at right now, health-wise, if gustong maglaro ng sport like this, siguro let's wait for community guidelines to be lifted. Although, iniisip natin na okay, kapitbahay ko naman sila, so maybe okay lang na makipaglaro ako with them. So, ibang household pa rin yun. So, let's help our frontliners. Sundin na lang natin muna yung community quarantine guidelines.
Thank you so much sa reminder, Ate Kina. Ano yung dinedemand ng mga sports na to para malaro natin ng maayos?
I mentioned earlier yung RGCR pattern, di ba? It's a basic skill for more complex movement. So dito makikita na natin yon, yung coordinated movements nila. So kaya ba nilang pag-perform ng arm-hand coordination, eye-hand coordination para properly matos or ma-shoot yung rings. Nandiyan na din yung proprioception kasi you have to estimate yung amount of force na kailangan mo para ma-shoot yung ring.
Kanina, RGCR patterns yung pinag-usapan ngayon, na-incorporate na siya into coordination kasi maraming body parts na yung gumagalaw. So, mas higher siya and mas advanced skill siya.
Yeah, ang galing kasi with just one material, you're able to make an activity that's fit for a toddler and at the same time, challenging enough for an adolescent.
Okay lang if I pose a question to the group. Yung kay Ma'am Audrey, maliliit yung rings, and this one is bigger. In terms of upgrade and downgrade for FMS and RGCR, ano yung sa tingin ninyo, how it work?
Actually, I think easier to hold yung malaki. So, kung mas maninipis, medyo mas mahirap siya hawakan kasi pwedeng fingers lang yung panghawak mo. Hindi, kung gusto mo mag-challenge ng teens, pwedeng mas payat yung rings or mas maliliit yung rings kasi mas mahirap din siya i-shoot kasi parang dexterity na yun.
Saka yung prop din, di ba? Kasi mas malaki, mas mabigat ng konti.
Yeah.
So, yung proprioception or yung feedback natin with the weight, different din siya. It's nice kasi pwede talaga interchangeable. Tapos, depends na lang on how you play it, yung dalawang toy.
Yeah, and sa goal ng activity mo.
Thank you so much dun sa mga input nyo. Okay, for our last toy, we have the sorting game all the way from Canada. Submitted by Cathy Talastas, OTRP. Okay, let's watch. Hi, Cathy.
Diba pag taga-Canada, ziplock yung plastic.
Ang target nito is older adults. So, at this age, ano yung importance importance ng facilitating activities like this na medyo sinestimulate yung cognitive skills nila.
Meron tayong outcome measures sa occupational
Yes.
therapy na tinatawag na maintaining. As we age, we also decline. And maintaining is one of our outcomes na i-maintain natin, essentially. Kung ano yung natutunan natin before, we are going to keep it. We're going to do exercises for us to remember how to do things and for our brains to stay active even as we age.
Yun. So, basically, parang mental exercise na to para sa mga
Yeah.
lolos and lolas
Yes.
natin. Interesting din na nakadikit sa wall. What are the possible reasons kung ba't kaya nakadikit siya sa wall?
Actually, naisip ko pwede sa wall kasi pwede siyang additional exercise for our lolos and lolas kasi kailangan mo itaas your arm and your shoulder. So, napapractice mo rin yung range of motion ng shoulder mo and yung arms, pati na rin yung fingers mo in order to hold the card and shoot it sa loob ng plastic. Yan. Tapos, syempre, to move your arm pataas, kailangan mo rin ng strength.
So, dun sa mga viewers namin, no, if you want to maintain strength, so hindi naman kailangan palagi na meron kaming weights or dumbbells. Meron kaming tinatawag na against gravity. So, meron na ding nagpo-pull na weight sa atin, lalo na pag inaangat natin to. Dahil dun sa konsepto na gravity. So, kahit sa simple pag-angat lang or simple range of motion, meron na ring strength dun na pumapasok.
Add ko lang, I think kasama na din dun since standing siya, kailangan meron ka ng balance in yung tamang posture.
Yes.
So,
older
nakikita
adults.
kasi natin for older adults, minsan, di ba, parang nagiging kuba na or nahihirapan na mag-balance. So, baka good din to para maka-help sa kanila. Pero kung may difficulty talaga sa pagbabalance, pwede naman yung may hawak na isang kamay sa wall para may konti silang steadiness.
Na-mention na din yan, no, about exercise. So, naisip ko lang din, pwede din modification for this is magkakalayo yung ziplock. Ma-promote lang, kumbaga, yung mobility or walking.
Yeah.
Exercise na rin yun.
Nabanggit mo yung modification, Sam. So, naisip ko, pwede rin na instead ng cards, palitan natin. Pwede nga actually yung medyo personal, kagaya ng photographs. So, sort niyo yung photographs niya ng wedding niya, photographs ng anak niya, or apo niya,
that's
di ba?
cute.
Imagine ko.
And I think
Diba?
appropriate din yung suggestion ni Ate Zane kasi pag older adults, kay Erickson, di ba, that's ego, integrity versus despair. And usually at this age, nagre-recall ka na lang ng mga memories mo. So it's nice kasi it's fit with what's expected of them then.
Nagtatap tayo ng konti sa emotions, no? Ano ba yung importance na we talk about emotions at their age?
Actually, maganda din, ayun, for older adults kasi may ilang older adults na who experience what we call geriatric depression. Minsan, naiiwan na lang sila sa bahay, their family doesn't interact with them as much, and wala rin na silang nagagawa because their bodies are weak na. This activity actually maganda siya kasi they'll be able to look back sa mga memories nila and realize na, hey, maganda pa yung buhay that I lived and I had some fun memories. This can be considered what we call validation therapy din. We talked about maintaining earlier. Parang just acknowledging yung mga existing memories or knowledge of the older adult. So instead of trying to teach new information, just validating yung mga existing knowledge of the older adult.
Itong activity na to, we can do it with other people then kasi they can start sharing their experiences sa mga neighbors nila or sa kapwa nilang lola or lola, sa mga apo nila even. So, it's another opportunity to teach them kung ano yung iba't ibang values that they learned throughout their years. Parang nagiging social support na din siya in a way.
So this is an activity na okay siyang gawin, okay? But this is not a substitute to therapy. Okay, so if ever we know people who are experiencing geriatric depression, it's better if you really do seek help. Kasi this is a general description of what this activity can be used for, but it is not personalized or individualized para sa isang tao lang talaga. So each person needs a different level of care. So let's always seek help for that.
Thank you so much dun sa sinabi ni Ahina. Let's go back dun sa purpose ng toy na sorting. So, ano yung mga possible ways to make it more challenging?
We can use unfamiliar categories din para mas a bit to add more challenge. O kaya naman, increase din natin yung number ng categories para mas madami silang isusort.
In relation Should din pala sa using your own pictures. They can sort the pictures based on yung life events nila. So they have to remember, kailan to nangyari or same event ba to nangyari. Yun. So natetest din yung long-term memory nila.
Cool din yung sequencing ng events. Di ko din siya naisip nun. So parang naisip ko lang, sige, dagdagan natin ng theme or ganyan. Mas challenging siya compared sa adding lang ng mga other categories. Ano pa ba kapag mas dadalian natin para sa kanila?
In terms of yung pag ROM na na-mention ni Nadea kanina.
Mhm.
So, this one is nasa wall. Pwede nating babaan ng konti muna and then progress. Or kung maintain lang talaga and hindi na talaga kayang iangat, at least maintain natin na yung function is hanggang dito. Kunwari, ang level, so hanggang dito lang yung mga bags natin na paglalagyan ng carts.
O kaya mas palapitin natin sila. So, yun yung mga pwedeng suggested upgrades and downgrades for this toy. So, that's it for our plastic bag episodes. Thank you, Audrey, Bernice, and Cathy for submitting your videos for this episode. So, na-impress ako sa mga submissions kasi kahit ako, I had a hard time thinking of toys or anything na pwedeng gawin dito sa plastic. Very interesting toys for this episode.
If you have any comments or suggestions, or if you have anything to add to our toy box, you can email us at the link below.
And don't forget to tag us in Facebook and Instagram and use the hashtag ToyboxPH.
Thanks for watching our video. Watch out for more content. Bye!
Bye!